Hi, everyone. Welcome to the first MEF webinar of 2024. We're really excited to have everyone on this call. This is a webinar on ditching data fragmentation, modernizing mobile anti-fraud practices. It's sponsored by netnumber. Thank you very much, netnumber. My name is Nick Rossman. I will be the moderator for today's session. I have been at MEF for roughly 1 year. I'm focused mostly on anti-fraud initiatives like the MEF Code of Conduct and other working groups that are focused on helping the industry find solutions to combating fraud. So nice to have you once again, and I'll hand over to Catalin to introduce himself.
Sure. Hi, Nick. Hello, everyone. Nice to be here. I'm Catalin Badea. I'm the VP of Product Management at netnumber. We are a phone number intelligence company. We've been around for over 20 years. One of our key priorities is fraud prevention, and that's what we're going to talk about today.
Excellent. So shall we pull up the screen then? I think Catalin will start walking people through.
Yeah, I'll do that here in a moment.
All right, excellent. Great. Looking good.
Perfect. Good. So thanks for the introduction, Nick. We're going to speak today about ditching data fragmentation and how to modernize anti-fraud practices. And fraud prevention is a topic that comes up at almost every industry event. We're starting a new year, 2024, but in a way, it's same old in terms of fraud and fraudsters. I've been looking up for some, recent statistics about what's going on in terms of fraud out there in the telecom space, and I found this here to be pretty interesting. If we're looking at Germany, where I'm located, the regulator received over 60,000 complaints last year of this, hi mom scam that's prevalent on both text messaging and OTT channels like WhatsApp. I know I've received a few of them, and pretty much everyone that I know received one of these messages at one moment or another. And this resulted into blocking 6,500 phone numbers that are used to send these messages. And I know that it's not just a German fraud method. It's something that seems to be prevalent in virtually all geographies out there. I've also found this statistic by CFCA interesting. Fraud in telecom continued to increase in 2023. I would say, despite all the efforts of the entire industry to implement, fraud prevention, fraud mitigation techniques, fraud is still out there, and it continues to keep us busy for the foreseeable future. Now, what are the types of fraud that are most prevalent? This obviously depends on who you're talking to, kind of the area and industry that they are active in. But I found this statistic published by Latro at the end of the year pretty interesting. These definitely are fraud scenarios, fraud mechanisms that come up in virtually every conversation that we have with our customers or with peers in the industry. From application subscription fraud to the credit mule fraud, where expensive handsets are purchased via fraudulent methods, and then PBX fraud is the next in line, account takeover, service or equipment abuse, and then wine gearly. So lots going on.
A lot of this really resonates with our MEF membership, Catalin. When we hold our working groups, often these types of fraud are brought up, and the industry is looking for ways to combat them. So definitely high on the radar. On the application fraud side, we saw quite a few stories go viral throughout 2023. I remember reading one story. It resonated with me because I'm one of those people who has lots and lots of subscriptions, and I can't even keep track of how many I have. In fact, it's a little bit embarrassing. And there's some bad actors who are really aware of that and were offering a service to promise to help users cancel unwanted subscriptions. But in fact, what they were doing was stealing these people's credentials and continuing to build them. So you see how the fraudsters are really on top of these sorts of trends. And it's kind of like the same thing with the credit mule fraud. There was an article though and went viral around how TikTok was being used by fraudsters to target young people who were a little bit naive. And these were frauds where scammers would lure young users into promises around quick cash, but in fact, the fraudsters were using it to money launder. So you can see how the fraudsters are aware of what's going on in the digital space and really taking advantage of people where they can. Yeah, we're definitely
Yeah.
seeing that now.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, fraudsters are obviously active. Um, now, what is the industry doing to mitigate that? MEF is definitely leading the pack, I would say. So, from the perspective of fraud in messaging, the MEF members have put together this very valuable business SMS fraud framework. I think it's a very useful resource on one hand to educate the industry on all fraud methods out there. But then also when you go and implement your fraud mitigation strategy, it speaks about some of the tools and it also helps with prioritization. They are, I think, 14 fraud types, if I remember this correctly. So you can't fix everything at once, but here is a framework that guides you through what's important, how it works, and what are the tools to help you mitigate that. And moving beyond messaging, another fraud prevention framework that I reference quite often and is relevant for voice is the Forum Voice Fraud Framework. And the industry is just doing a lot. If we're looking on the right-hand side of this page here, there are many industry groups that have fraud prevention as one of their topics. Some of them are dedicated to fraud prevention, like the CFCA, for example. Many of them might have, might care to more topics and themes, but fraud prevention is usually at least, a working group, if not more. MEF have several such initiatives, and I will not go through everything, but you see that, pretty much everywhere, Europe, North America, there is work being done to mitigate fraud. Now, the sad truth is that communications fraud will never go away. Fraudsters there is a financial motivation, and as long as there is money to be made, there will always be, people out there trying to exploit everything possible to make that money. I think what's important, however, for us in the industry is to make it as hard and as unprofitable for them to perform this fraud. Now, go ahead.
Yeah, in fact, in fact, we did a survey for 2023 of our members, and we found that fraud ranks #1 in terms of issues that they're concerned about. On the fraud framework, you're right, there's 14. We've beefed up or added a new one, which is around artificial inflated traffic, AIT, or some people refer to it as artificially generated traffic. This has become a really big issue for our members. So for 2024, we're looking into ways where we can facilitate and help our members deal with AIT. And the other one that I'm sure everybody is well aware of is artificial intelligence, AI, which can be a tool both to enable or to help prevent fraud. And of course, lots of concern around how AI is used. And it's another area where MEF will be beefing up its activities to assist our members. So all very relevant. Thank you.
Yeah, perfect. All right. So now, let's say that you're a company out there, an enterprise, an aggregator, an operator, and you want to beef up your fraud prevention strategy. We've seen already that there are those 14, 15 now fraud mechanisms in messaging. There are tens of them for voice. it's really impossible to, from one day to another to mitigate each and every one of them. There is always an effort and there is a cost associated with implementing fraud prevention. And honestly, you might not be even affected by some of these. So it's really important when you look at your fraud prevention strategy to prioritize, determine what's relevant for you, and then prioritize, start with 80-20 and then make sure you get the best return on investment. And when you're looking at selecting and prioritizing, there are a few things that are important. And, I've listed them here in this table, really. You need to look at the channel. Is this, a text a fraud type? Is it a voice fraud type? Does it affect both channels? Because maybe you're a messaging provider and have nothing to do with voice. In that case, there is no reason for you to look so deeply into voice-only fraud mechanisms. Then, who's the victim? Is it the enterprise, the brand? Is it the aggregator in the middle? Is it the receiving operator, the carrier, or the subscriber? Depending on your role in the ecosystem, some fraud types are relevant, some might not. And then, what's the impact of that fraud? It can vary from nuisance to identity theft and to financial losses. And not to say that nuisance is not important, but you will obviously start with those that are potentially harming you or your customers in terms of financially or identity theft, which is pretty serious. So yeah, this model provides a framework. Not saying that it's exhaustive. It's more about a way of thinking and structuring the different fraud types that are out there to determine what's important and how to prioritize.
Yeah, I mean, I'm seeing pretty much all the fraud types that we have in our fraud framework. So I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but they're all there. Just out of curiosity, what would you say from your customers' requests or demands? Which areas of fraud are you most solicited to tackle by your customers?
Yeah, it's many, but I would say top of the list, AIT, AGT. You mentioned this is a concern for the MEF members. This is a concern for pretty much everyone. As you can see here, there are multiple parties that stay to lose out financially. The brand obviously is the primary target, but then also the aggregators if the invoices don't get paid. And for subscribers, it can be a nuisance at the minimum where they receive messages that are not even requested. And this is complemented by the fact that there is no perfect solution for AIT yet. There are things that you can do to mitigate it, but there is no one single thing that you can do. And you can say as of tomorrow, I will not be affected by AIT anymore. So that's one of them. The other one is more around account takeover and account takeover in the context of brand impersonation. So using either text or the text channel or the voice channel, pretending you are a bank, pretending you are a trustworthy brand out there, and then using this as a mechanism to steal credentials and perpetrate fraud. To this latter type of fraud, we've actually launched a unique product in the market at the end of last year. It's called Number Lock. It's specific to the United States, where the text messaging ecosystem is implemented in a way that we manage the NetNumber services registry, where text-enabled numbers are stored and distributed to the industry. So based on that and based on our role in the ecosystem, we've implemented a service that helps brands prevent text enablement of phone numbers that are not used for texting, and therefore, closing a potential channel for abuse via brand impersonation.
Yeah. No, all very interesting. Thanks.
Yep. So we kind of set the stage now. How do you actually go about implementing your fraud mitigation strategy? The bad news is that the market is really fragmented. The data is very fragmented. So if we're looking at what you can use for fraud prevention, there are probably 10 to 20 things, data sets, services, models out there. Again, there is no one single place or one single data that will help you from today to tomorrow to mitigate all fraud. Depending on what you want to do, depending on what you want to achieve, you might need to use one or more of these elements that are listed here on the page. So, you start to read about them, you start to look at what's relevant to you. No surprise that, you might be confused because it's just so much of it, and it's always working differently in terms of, commercials and data structures and stuff like that. So this is where what we call phone number intelligence comes into play. And we'll speak about phone number intelligence in a moment here and kind of what it entails. But the headline would be, it's a quote from Norman Cousins, history is a vast early warning system. So what do we know about phone numbers, both from a current status and historically, to help us implement fraud prevention? So first of all, what is phone number intelligence? We're using this word a lot, but let's just take a deeper look at what it contains. It's essentially metadata associated with a phone number, and some of these data points are listed on the left here. For example, what's the carrier that's servicing a specific phone number? What's the number type? Is it a mobile number? Is it a landline number? Can that phone number be used for texting services, or is it a voice-only phone number? Is it ported? When was it last ported? Was the SIM card associated with the phone number replaced recently? Is the phone number valid or invalid, and has it been, involved in fraud? So when you look at these data points, and there's many more, these are just for example only, but when you look at these data points, you start to build an image about a phone number. The beauty of it is that phone numbers are core of virtually all telecommunication activities. And on one hand, you have, texting, voice calls, obviously phone numbers are involved. But even beyond that, even beyond the pure, telecom use cases, phone numbers are nowadays in many cases, or in the most cases, used as identifiers, account identifiers. For example, you can set up an account on most websites out there using the phone number as your ID instead of the email now. Even if it's not a primary identifier, brands typically collect the phone number during the registration process, and the phone number is used for two-factor authentication typically. Two-factor authentication is prevalent by now, so the phone number is typically associated with a user account to secure it. So one way or another, whenever someone is signing up for a service, performing a specific financial transaction or whatever, the phone number is part of that. And this brings you the power of looking at the phone number and pulling all these data points, or the ones that are relevant for your specific use case, and then assessing fraud risk. And there is almost a scale here as to how sophisticated you can go. If we look on the right hand side, so it starts on the bottom with integrity. Is the phone number even a valid phone number? If someone is trying to sign up with an invalid phone number, is it by mistake, or is there someone just trying to set up an account on my platform and then generate spam, let's say? You move up, you have the history of a phone number. Was the phone number involved in anything fraudulent before? Was the number ported recently? Was the SIM card changed recently? These are might be indicators for account takeover. And as you analyze the history, you start to build a reputation of the phone number. And with that reputation, it becomes really powerful when you incorporate that information into your processes. So yeah, moving on, you have that. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, you've from the reputation stage, you move upwards. You have the entire status of a phone number, both current and historic, And then the ultimate goal that you want to achieve here is to assess trust. You want to build a system that makes sure that only the trustworthy transactions happen, only the trustworthy users are part of the community, and you make sure that you leave out those that are potential risk.
Yeah, very good description. I now know an awful lot more, and it's really, really helpful. I'm just curious, what would you say are the market trends in terms of availability of phone number intelligence data points?
Mm-hmm. That's a good question. So, the market remains fragmented, as I've mentioned, but there are some positive developments, and one of the most positive development is the fact that operators are exposing fraud prevention data points via APIs. It was a challenge many years ago to go and collect some of this data and build that reputation of a phone number. Nowadays, and this is not true in all geographies, but in many geographies, in particular, Western Europe and North America, South America, there's a pretty comprehensive operator API offering where you can go and get authoritative data for many of those items that I've listed on the left-hand side. And this is really powerful. It makes it really easy to build services, have accurate data, and so on. At the same time, I would say what's also changing, people have relied historically on HLR queries for phone number verification. That's, in my opinion, no longer an appropriate tool. There are, better, more authoritative and granular data points that you can use to assess if phone numbers are valid or invalid, and much more beyond that.
Great, thanks.
All right, so let's move on. Now, how does this all come together? We spoke about the different fraud types. We spoke about phone number intelligence. Now, what's the use of it? How does phone number intelligence actually help with fraud prevention? So without going through the entire table here, maybe I'll just pick one to illustrate. The idea here is that the different data points that can be exposed about phone numbers help with particular fraud types to reduce, mitigate, depending on that specific use case. So if we look at the first one here, caller ID or sender ID spoofing. A simple check that can be done is the caller ID for voice calls or the sender ID for messaging, is it even a valid allocated number? Now, fraudsters are pretty smart, and many of them will use valid numbers when spoofing to avoid detection. But some still use invalid numbers. So that's a really easy way to mitigate fraud right at the start and cut off a certain percentage of these voice calls and or messages. Even if they are valid numbers, they might show up on different fraud lists. They might be known fraudulent numbers. This is also something that is available, can be exposed, and can help with identifying those fraudsters. This goes on and on. So like I said, without really going through all the table, the idea is that whatever the a fraud mechanism is, there is typically some information associated with a phone number that can help address that specific fraud type.
I'm going to put you on the spot. So just thinking of our members, and as we've said throughout today's webinar, the concern around artificially inflated traffic. On this one, when you look at, I'm just looking at the column on the right. When you look at unusual patterns in traffic distribution, I guess that would be on a per market basis, and then you would look at normally what kind of traffic you would expect to come into that market, and whether there's spikes. Is
Correct.
Sort of along those lines, yeah.
You're right. You're right. Yeah, like I said earlier, I don't think there is a perfect tool for artificially inflated traffic, but definitely you need to look at your traffic profile continuously and identify unusual trends there. And it can be that your customers are typically in certain countries, and out of a sudden you see that users are signing up or they're requesting password resets or whatever in a market where you didn't have messaging traffic before. It can go even more granularly to the operator level. Let's say it's a market where you do have customers. Normally, your messaging traffic should follow roughly the market shares of the respective operators. If you assume, you have a normal subscriber sign-up process, you would typically have messages following the market share of the operators there. Now, if suddenly you see the amount of messages to a specific operator, maybe a small operator, increasing dramatically, then that's also something that's a red flag, and you need to go and look into that. So, and this is real time. And that's the beauty of it. So, there are many tools that come after the fact. You see the invoice at the end of the month, and then the invoice doesn't reconcile. You have a higher cost than expected. You go and dig up. That's all good, but at that point, the fraud has already happened. By monitoring your traffic profile in real time, essentially in minutes, if you have a good monitoring and alerting system, within minutes you can, know about it, go and look into it, and close the hole there.
You answered my follow-up question, which was, is it a proactive or a reactive type of solution? It seems like real time is a very helpful way of addressing it, because as you say, if it's a month later when it's time to do the billing reconciliation, it's a bit too late.
Yeah. I think the real time is the headline, really, not only for what we are doing, but in general for what the industry does in terms of fraud prevention. If you want to keep up with fraudsters, you need to be real time. Even when we're speaking about, phone numbers used for spoofing and for other fraud prevention, for other fraud purposes, what you typically see is that fraudsters will rotate the numbers within minutes. They know there are powerful SMS firewalls out there, powerful voice firewalls out there, and if they continue using the same phone numbers for fraud for more than 5 or 10 minutes, in many cases they will be detected. So it's essential when implementing fraud prevention to have a service that is in real time. Otherwise, it's too late.
I think it also helps because it's surreptitious, or I can't say the word, that message trashing comes right after AIT, because I think we're seeing a trend now where some bad actors recognize that the traffic is artificially inflated, and rather than terminate it, they trash it. So again, a real-time solution would be very helpful in those sorts of scenarios.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, this goes hand in hand. And while message trashing is hard to detect, these things play almost hand in hand, because you typically have you can typically measure a conversion rate. If there is a call to action in your text message, input this one-time password on the website or whatever, then you have a conversion rate, and then you can correlate the conversion rate. You can report it or analyze it by carrier, and then you can identify, I see a decreased conversion rate, and it happens with all my messages sent to operator X. That's a really powerful insight that allows you to go and analyze in detail this specific scenario, rather than your entire message traffic, which is humongous typically.
Yeah, thanks.
Perfect. Okay, thank you, Nick. So now we're getting close to the end of the presentation here. I'd like to summarize by giving attendees an idea about how to where is this data available from? What are the typical providers for data? And I'll start at the bottom, and we talked about this. You have more and more operators implementing APIs. This is what I call authoritative data. You get the data directly from the operators. It's powerful, it's accurate. What's challenging when using operator provider data is that it's not uniform. There are different APIs, different API specifications. There are efforts in the industry now to unify those APIs, which is great, but until we get there, you still have different APIs in between the different carriers. The pricing models also differ between the operators, and in the end, it's if you want to scale, across many geographies or potentially across the whole world, you need to sign a contract with each of the operators. So might be a little more tedious to implement. On the right-hand side, the traffic analytics providers, and I'm including here both the players from the messaging and from the voice space, so SMS or signaling firewalls on the voice side, and then voice firewalls or analytic engines for voice. So they have the big advantage that they see the traffic in real time. And when you see a lot of messages or a lot of voice calls, and with the advance of AI, there are a lot of things that you can deduct about the traffic. You can detect fraud, really quickly. And this is what they are doing. And we have a partnership here with one of the analytics engines in the United States, with First Orion, where we are offering in partnership information about phone numbers that are used for scam calls, and these are detected in real time by their platform. Now, at the top, we have a netnumber as a phone number intelligence providers and a provider. In terms of how we're structuring our services, what we are doing is that we combine all this data together. So both our own data together with industry data and other data that we're purchasing from third parties on the market, all this data is unified. And this is the big advantage here, because the data being so fragmented, there is a lot of work going behind the scenes into correlating it, normalizing it, cleaning it up, in order to be able to provide insights about virtually any phone number in the world. There are around 10 billion phone numbers in the world, and we can provide information about any of them. So when you work with us, what happens is that everything is unified in a single API. It doesn't matter which operator, which geography you're using. The API looks exactly the same. And then the same benefits apply also to the contractual and the pricing framework, where there is one contract, not multiple, and also the pricing model is unified in a way that's really easy to use and understand. Yeah, that's the landscape really. And I would like
Just
to
going back to that
Sure.
slide, I had a quick question, if you don't mind. So I
Sure.
was just noticing that a lot of the data you collect is global in nature, and I was wondering what the hurdles might be on a sort of a per market basis. So I'm originally from Canada, so let's use Canada as an example. If you have a customer in Canada and you're using your data analytics to assist them, are there any limitations around what data you can share or use on a like call it a domestic or per market basis?
Yeah, that's a good question. So while we do everything possible to make the data uniform and offering it on a global basis, there are sometimes these country level restrictions that are important, and we observe them. I'll pick maybe one or two examples here. So in Canada, if you want to have access to the local number portability data, you need to go through an approval process with the entity managing the number portability framework there, the CLNPC. We will inform you that as a first step, you have to provide, go through this process and provide this evidence that you've done that. And only after that are we able to provide you with the respective data after you show the proof. It's similar in the UK. If we pick another example, the Ofcom is managing a DNO list. In order to get access to the DNO list, you need to fulfill certain criteria, be a telecommunication provider based in the UK and use it for preventing fraudulent calls. So all these market specific. So they're not only market specific, they are market by data type specifics, I would call them. We are aware of all of them. And obviously we work with our customers to make sure they fulfill the respective obligations, and then we provide the data that is permitted for that.
Excellent, thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. All right, so I think we're getting to the end here. So I just wanted to conclude by saying that, without phone number intelligence, what you have is just a phone number, and that's not great. That's not a great place to start combating fraud.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for this presentation. I know I've learned quite a lot. I hope those of you on the webinar have also learned. I'm not seeing any follow-up questions in the chat, so I guess everybody was clear on what we've been going through. So if there's no more questions or comments, we're happy to end the webinar here. Again, I'd like to thank everyone, and I'd like to wish everybody a nice day, and thank you, Catalin, for such a good presentation.
Thank you, to Nick.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.